My name is Harold Whitcombe, and at 67 years of age, I had walked into the Royal Botanic Pavilion in Sydney wearing a charcoal gray suit that I'd had tailored in 1998. The cuffs were slightly worn. The collar of my shirt sat a touch loose around a neck that had thinned with the years. My shoes were polished, but they were the same brogues I'd worn to my wife Eleanor's funeral 7 years earlier. I had carried a small wrapped gift in brown paper, tied with twine, because that's how my mother taught me to wrap a gift, and I had never seen reason to change. I was the father of the groom. My son Nathaniel was marrying Cordelia Ashworth-Pemberton that evening, and the Ashworth-Pemberton family had spared no expense. There were 320 guests, crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, a string quartet from the conservatorium playing Vivaldi, while waiters in white gloves carried champagne flutes that probably cost more than the suit on my back. And I had been seated at table 37, near the kitchen doors, beside a deaf great-aunt who didn't know who I was. I want to tell you what happened that night. I want to tell you because I think there are people watching this who have felt what I felt when Cordelia's father, Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton, stood up with a glass of champagne in his hand and decided to make a toast. A toast that, in his words, would acknowledge the unfortunate but unavoidable presence of certain elements at his daughter's wedding. He looked directly at me when he said it. The laughter that followed was the kind of laughter that turns your blood cold. 200 wealthy Sydneysiders, in their tuxedos and their gowns, throwing their heads back at the joke that I, Harold Whitcombe, the man who had raised the groom alone for the last 7 years, was the punchline of, Reginald wasn't finished, mind you. He went on. He said it was a pity that good breeding couldn't be inherited from a father who clearly didn't have any. He said my late wife must have been a saint to have produced a son like Nathaniel despite the genetic disadvantages. He said, and I'll never forget this phrase as long as I live, that I was lucky. The Ashworth-Pemberton family had agreed to absorb my son into respectable society at all. Cordelia's mother, Felicity, was laughing into her napkin. Her brother Crispin was filming me on his phone, and my son Nathaniel, my only child, the boy I had carried on my shoulders through Centennial Park when his mother was too sick to walk with us, was standing at the front of the room next to his bride, and he was looking at the floor. He didn't say a word. That was the moment that broke something in me. Not the insult, not the laughter, the silence of my son. I stood up slowly. The deaf great-aunt next to me carried on eating her bread roll, oblivious. I placed my linen napkin neatly on the table beside my untouched plate. I reached down for the small wrapped gift I had brought, and I tucked it carefully under my arm. And I started walking. I walked the length of that grand ballroom, past tables of strangers in their pearls and their cufflinks, past the pyramid of crystal champagne glasses, past the ice sculpture of 2 swans, and I walked towards the exit. The whole time, Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton was still talking, still cracking his cruel little jokes, still puffed up with the absolute certainty that I was a nobody he could mock for sport. I had almost reached the doors when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick footsteps. Running, almost. Dad. I turned around. It was Nathaniel. His face was white. His bow tie was crooked. There were tears in his eyes. Dad, please, please, don't go. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I froze. I looked at my son. I looked at him for a long time, and then I asked him a question that I think every parent in my situation eventually has to ask. Nathaniel, are you going back in there? Or are you coming with me? He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. He took the white rose out of his lapel, and he dropped it on the marble floor of the pavilion. Then he took my arm, and we walked out together. Behind us, I heard Cordelia's voice rising in panic. Then Reginald's voice, sharp now, calling my son's name. Then Felicity, shrieking something I couldn't make out. We didn't turn around. We walked out into the warm Sydney evening. The fairy lights were strung up between the Moreton Bay figs. Somewhere across the harbor, a ferry was sounding its horn. I took out my mobile phone, and I made a call. The man on the other end picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Whitcombe, Edmund." "It's time." "Understood, sir." "Shall I proceed with the full sequence?" "Yes, Edmund. All of it." "Tonight." I hung up the phone. Nathaniel was staring at me. "Dad." "Who was that?" "What sequence?" I put my hand on my son's shoulder. He was 31 years old, but in that moment he looked like the 8-year-old boy I'd taught to ride a bike at Bronte Beach. "Nathaniel, sit down with me on that bench over there. There are some things I should have told you a long time ago." We sat down on a wrought iron bench under a Moreton Bay fig. The wedding reception was carrying on inside, but I imagine the noise level had dropped considerably. They would be looking for us now. Looking for him. "Nathaniel, what do you know about my work?" He blinked. "You're retired, Dad. You used to do consulting. For mining companies, you said." "That's what I told you. That's what I told everyone, including your mother, for the first 10 years of our marriage." I took a deep breath. "Son, I want to ask you to listen to me without interrupting. Can you do that?" He nodded. "My name is Harold Whitcombe." "That part is true. But I'm not a retired consultant. For the last 43 years, I have been the founder, majority shareholder, and chairman of the board of a holding company called Whitcombe Erskine Pty Limited. We don't have a public name because we operate behind other companies. But Whitcombe Erskine owns controlling stakes in approximately 17% of the publicly listed mining and resource companies on the Australian Stock Exchange. We also have substantial holdings in agriculture, in shipping, and in commercial property in 3 countries. Nathaniel was very still. "My net worth, as of the close of business yesterday, is 2.3 billion Australian dollars. He didn't speak. He couldn't, I think. "I never told you because your mother and I made a decision when you were born. We decided that you would grow up like a normal child, going to a normal school, riding a normal bus, working a normal weekend job at the surf shop in Coogee, because we had both seen what inherited wealth without character does to young people, and we did not want that for you." Your mother was firm on this. She said, and I quote, that she would rather you grow up poor and decent than rich and rotten. I paused. The sound of footsteps came from the pavilion. Someone was running across the lawn. "When your mother got sick, I told her I wanted to tell you. She said no. She said wait until you were truly settled, until you had built your own life, until you knew who you were without it. She made me promise." "Dad, let me finish, son. Tonight that man called Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton, he didn't know who I was. He just saw an old man in an old suit, and he decided I was beneath him. And his daughter, your fiancée, has known me for 2 years. She has come to my home in Vaucluse twice. Did you ever wonder why I kept that flat in Bondi? The small one, I told her, was where I lived." Nathaniel's mouth was open. I wanted to see Nathaniel. I wanted to see how she treated a man she thought had nothing. And what I saw, son, has been breaking my heart for a year and a half. "Dad, the flat in Bondi, the one with the cracked window?" "Yes. I've never been to Vaucluse." "No. Your mother and I bought the Vaucluse house in 1991. It's where we were going to retire together. It's a 5-bedroom federation with views of the harbor. It's where Edmund, my private secretary, lives in a separate cottage. Edmund has been with me for 31 years. You met him once when you were small. You called him Uncle Eddie. Uncle Eddie." Nathaniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "I remember Uncle Eddie. He gave me a model train. Yes, a figure was approaching across the lawn now. It was Cordelia. Her wedding dress was lifted up at the hem so she could run. Her face was streaked with tears, but I could see, even from 20 meters away, that they were not the right kind of tears. They were the tears of a woman whose plan was unraveling. "Nathaniel," she called. "Darling, come back inside." My father didn't mean it the way it sounded. It was a joke. "Nathaniel, please." Nathaniel stood up. I stood up beside him. "Cordelia," he said. "Stop walking, please. Stay where you are." She stopped about 10 paces away from us. "Cordelia, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, because the rest of your life depends on it." "Nathaniel, you're being ridiculous. In the pavilion, your father called my father human trash. He called my father, the man who raised me, a man without breeding. Your mother laughed. Your brother filmed it. And you stood next to me. And you said nothing. You said nothing, Cordelia. Darling, what was I supposed to say? It was father. You don't understand my family. They were just, that's all I needed to know." He turned to me. "Dad, where do we go? Edmund will be here in 8 minutes. He's bringing the car. 8 minutes is too long. Let's walk." So we walked. We walked away from that pavilion, past Cordelia, who was now wailing on the lawn in a wedding dress that I imagine cost $40,000, past a knot of confused guests who had spilled out the front entrance to see what the commotion was. And we walked towards the harbor. Behind us, I heard Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton roaring my son's name. Nathaniel did not turn around. We reached the seawall and stopped there. The lights of the city were on the water. The southerly wind had come up. Nathaniel was shaking, but I don't think it was from cold. "Dad." The phone call. The sequence. What was that? I looked at my son. My boy. The reason for everything I had ever built. Nathaniel. About 6 months ago, when I started to suspect what kind of family the Ashworth-Pembertons really were, I asked Edmund to do some quiet research. The kind of research that very few people in this country have the resources to do. What did he find? Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton's wealth is not what it appears. The family fortune was made by his grandfather in wool and wheat in the 1920s. His father grew it modestly. But Reginald himself has been a poor steward of his family's money. 20 years ago, he made a series of bad investments in Indonesian timber that nearly bankrupted the family trust. He concealed the losses by leveraging the Pemberton estate in the Hunter Valley. He's been running an effective Ponzi structure within his own family's wealth for the last 15 years. The cousins, the aunts, the relatives whose trust funds he manages, none of them know that the money they think they have isn't there. He's been paying out from new debt. Nathaniel was staring at the water. "There's more." "More?" "Cordelia's brother Crispin. The one who filmed me tonight. He's been running an unregistered investment scheme out of his consulting firm. He's taken about $11 million from 46 retail investors, most of them retirees, and the money is gone. He has 60 days, by my estimate, before the regulator catches up to him. Probably less. Dad, and Cordelia's son. Cordelia. My voice almost broke. I took a moment. Edmund got hold of 3 years of her email correspondence. I won't tell you how. Cordelia has been having an ongoing relationship with a man named Tobias Hartford. He's a lawyer in Melbourne. Married. 2 kids. The relationship has been going on since before she met you. Nathaniel's face went very, very pale. There are emails, Nathaniel. There are photographs. There is a hotel reservation for the night, before tonight's rehearsal dinner. They were together that night. He sat down on the seawall. He sat down very slowly, like an old man. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let it go this far? Because, son, I needed you to see it for yourself. Tonight, you saw it. Tonight you stood in that ballroom while my dignity was torn apart for sport, and you saw your fiancée stand silent next to her sneering father. If I had told you 6 months ago, you would have argued with me. You would have said I didn't know her. You would have said love was more complicated than evidence. And maybe you would have married her anyway, and learned the rest of it from divorce lawyers 10 years from now. I couldn't let that happen to you. He put his head in his hands. The headlights of a car appeared at the end of the road. It was a black Bentley. Edmund was at the wheel. He didn't pull up next to us. He stopped at a respectful distance and waited, which is the kind of man Edmund is. Dad. The phone call. The sequence. What did you tell Edmund to do? I sat down beside my son on the seawall, Nathaniel. About 4 months ago, I made some decisions. I want to tell you what they were, so that you understand exactly what is happening, and so that you can tell me, if you want to, that I have gone too far. If you tell me that, son, I will undo what can be undone. Tell me. 2 months ago, Whitcombe Erskine purchased, through 3 intermediary companies, the bank that holds the mortgages on every Ashworth-Pemberton property, including the Hunter Valley estate. We now hold those mortgages. The loans were not in default. The terms were unfavorable to me, frankly. But I bought the position because I wanted control of it. Dad, 3 weeks ago, Edmund's team finished compiling a complete dossier on Crispin Ashworth-Pemberton's investment scheme. The dossier was anonymously delivered to ASIC this afternoon. By Monday morning, the regulator will have all the evidence they need. Jesus. Dad. Last week, I instructed my media holdings to begin a formal investigation into Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton's financial affairs. The story will run in the Sydney Morning Herald on Tuesday, with full documentation. The board of his Pemberton Foundation will be forced to remove him within 48 hours of publication, which is the term required by their charter. Dad, and tonight, while we sat in that pavilion, at the moment Reginald began his toast, Edmund authorized the simultaneous calling in of every line of credit Whitcombe Erskine holds on the Ashworth-Pemberton entities. Reginald has approximately 72 hours to repay roughly $41 million, or his estate, his Sydney house, his country house, his car collection, and the gallery on Macquarie Street will all become the property of my holding companies. I expect he cannot repay. I expect he will lose everything. Nathaniel stared at me. Dad, you have destroyed them. You have destroyed all of them. In one evening, I have given them back what they earned, son. Reginald's losses were his own. Crispin stole from pensioners. Cordelia betrayed your love and your trust for 2 years. None of this is my doing. I have only chosen the timing. He was quiet for a long time. Dad, the man in there, the man who said those things to you tonight, did you know he would say something like that? I had a strong suspicion he might. Yes, you let him hurt you. In front of 300 people, you sat there and let him. Nathaniel, I have been called worse things by better men. Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton's words could not touch me, son. The only person in that room whose words could have hurt me was you, and you came after me. So nothing that happened in there mattered. He started to cry then. Not the panicked tears of his fiancée on the lawn, the deep, slow, racking tears of a grown man who has just learned several true things at once. I let him cry. I put my hand on his shoulder, and I let him cry. After a while, he sat up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, the way he had done when he was a boy. Dad, what happens now? Now we get in the car with Edmund, and we go home. To my home. To our home. There's a bedroom that has been waiting for you for 31 years. Tomorrow, we have a great deal to talk about. The day after that, son, you have a meeting with my lawyers. Because if you would like, and only if you would like, I am going to begin teaching you the business that, one day, will be yours. Dad, I don't know if you don't have to decide tonight. You don't have to decide this year. We will do this at your pace, or not at all. Whatever you choose. He looked back, just once, towards the pavilion. The fairy lights were still strung up. The string quartet had stopped playing. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I froze in there. I'm so sorry I didn't say anything when Nathaniel. Stop. There is nothing for you to apologize for. You're here. That's all that matters. We got in the car. Edmund nodded to me in the rearview mirror. He's a man of few words. Where to, Mr. Whitcombe? Home, Edmund. Take us home. The Bentley pulled away from the curb. The lights of the harbor swept across my son's face as he stared out the window. I think he was seeing the city for the first time. In some way. Seeing it differently. That was 9 months ago. I should tell you the rest. Because I think the rest matters. Reginald Ashworth-Pemberton lost the Hunter Valley estate 3 days later. He could not raise the $41 million. He sold the Sydney house at a steep loss the following month. But it was not enough. By the end of that quarter, he was bankrupt. The Pemberton Foundation removed him from the board, as I had predicted. He and Felicity moved to a small flat in Adelaide, owned by one of her cousins. I do not know what their lives are like now. I do not particularly want to know. Crispin was arrested 7 weeks after the wedding. He is currently awaiting trial on 23 counts of fraud. The retirees whose money he stole will not get it all back, but they will get some of it back. Because, very quietly and through several intermediaries, I made up a portion of the difference. I did not tell anyone. I tell you now only because I think it matters that you know money can do good things if you are deliberate about it. Cordelia. Cordelia married Tobias Hartford, 11 months after our wedding day, after his messy divorce. I am told they live in Brighton. I do not think about her very often. Nathaniel, my son. Nathaniel started at Whitcombe Erskine the Monday after the wedding. He started at the bottom, by his own insistence. He made coffee for the analysts for 6 weeks. Then he sat in on board meetings as an observer. He's now learning the agriculture portfolio under the woman who has run it for me for 20 years. He is good at it. I think his mother would be proud. He met someone 3 months ago. Her name is Pippa. She works in conservation, on a project to restore wetlands in the Macquarie Marshes. She has no idea, yet, that my son is an heir to a substantial fortune. He has not told her. He says he wants to be sure first. He is taking her to meet me next weekend, at the Vaucluse house. He's going to have her wear casual clothes, and he's going to introduce me as just his dad. I think I'll wear my old gray suit. I want to say a few things to whoever is watching this. Before I go, I want to say, first, that no amount of money on this earth can make a person into something they are not. The Ashworth-Pembertons had wealth, 3 generations of it. And what wealth gave them was the unshakable belief that they were better than the man at table 37. Belief is not the same as truth. A man's worth is not in his suit or his shoes, or the postcode he sleeps in. A man's worth is in what he does when no one is watching, and in what he does when someone weaker than him is hurting, and in what he does when a stranger needs a hand up. If you take nothing else from my story, take that. I want to say, second, that if you have a child, the most important thing you can give them is not money, and it is not advantage. It is character. My wife, Eleanor, knew this. She insisted on it. She insisted that our boy bus to school like every other boy. She insisted he work for his pocket money. She insisted he not know, until he was a grown man, that he had been born into a different kind of life than the one we let him see. And because of her, he became the man who chose to follow his father out of that ballroom, instead of staying behind to chase the dowry. There is no tuition that buys what she taught him. None. I want to say, third, that if you are watching this, and you have been in a room where someone you love was being humiliated, and you froze, and you said nothing, please listen carefully. Forgive yourself. We all freeze sometimes. The shame is not in the freezing. The shame is in walking away afterwards and pretending it did not happen. Nathaniel ran after me. He caught up with me at the door. He made it right. You can make it right too. Pick up the phone. Knock on the door. Say the words you should have said. Most damaged things between people can be repaired if you are willing to be the first one to start the repair. And I want to say, fourth, and I will say this last, that contempt for poor people is the surest sign of a small soul. The people who sneer at the man with the worn cuffs, the woman at the supermarket counting her coins, the family with the old car, the migrant with the difficult accent, those people are telling you, very loudly, that they are afraid of becoming what they sneer at. A confident person, a person of real worth, has no need to look down on anyone. The next time you see someone treat a stranger with contempt, look at that person carefully and know what you are seeing. You are seeing a frightened person. You are not seeing strength. You are seeing the opposite of strength. My name is Harold Whitcombe. I'm 67 years old. I live in a Federation house in Vaucluse with a view of the harbor, and most days I sit on the back veranda and read the paper, and I think about my Eleanor, and I miss her, and I am grateful that the boy we raised together turned out to be the man he is. If this story meant something to you, please leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read every one of them. I would particularly like to know if any of you have stood up from a table 37 of your own. I would particularly like to know if you ever went back, or if you walked out, and what happened to you afterwards. Until next time, take care of each other. And never, never look down on anyone unless you are bending down to lift them up.